Real estate markets, specifically downtown core commercial real estate markets, they are about to have exactly what Portland is experiencing that we're going to talk about today happen to them as well. You got a situation where everybody went to work remotely because of the whole pandemic. Not enough folks who come back to the downtown core, and big buildings are being sold for literally pennies on the dollar. 80, 90% discounts from previous market value and previous sales prices. Well, in Portland, Oregon, the city council just had kind of a lesson. They had their auditor, their assessor, their county assessor come in and give them a little lesson on what the impacts are of a massive fire sale to their biggest building in the downtown core. What's that look like? Here we go. Let's get into it. Those of you who are not familiar with who I am a real estate appraiser, business owner, a designated managing broker. For the past 30 years, my two companies have either appraised or sold literally hundreds of millions of dollars worth of real estate here in the Puget Sound market. So that's my background. The article we're reading today is from Anthony Effinger, and he is with the Willamette Week. And this is a really good article because this stuff is boring. Because you're talking about commercial buildings, all based on income streams, and taxation. Who cares? Well, if you're looking to run a city budget, this stuff is important. It is important. When it sold at a deep discount in July, the iconic building set a bad precedent. Here's Big Pink here, right? So, it is a massive building, and we talked about that. We'll get into some of the numbers here as we go. Most American cities' property taxes are less complicated than particle physics or string theory. The same is true in Portland, but just barely. Agreed, Anthony, after reading this article and reading your description of what tax compression looks like. It's like, okay, yeah, that's tricky. But the current city council may be the first one ever to ask administrators to come explain it, according to Multnomah County Assessor Mike Vaughn. He and John Botatis, the county's head of appraisals, answered an invitation by City Councilor Olivia Clark to do so on October 16th. In an interview, Clark said that she arranged the session to bring greater sensitivity to downtown businesses. It's really important, she said, that people understand how local government is funded if we're going to pay for the programs that people want throughout the city. Cause and effect. You've got a downtown core in Portland, Oregon that is absolutely hollowed out. I was there covering the ridiculous, just absolute for show Antifa protests against the ICE building. ICE is doing what ICE does in every administration. But at the time being, in Portland, city officials, city leadership, down to the police captain and police chief has basically said, let Antifa have their way with things. Guess what? That kind of attitude, having a whole bunch of bad news, city of Portland's on fire. Just the optics alone are enough for big businesses won't want to touch Portland with a 10-foot pole. And walking through downtown Portland at night, it was shocking how few retail street businesses there were. It's not shocking that Big Pink sells for basically a 95% discount, 90% discount from one of its previous valuations. It's almost worth nothing. And what it sold for is basically land value. How's that happen with one of their biggest buildings, period? How's that happened? Well, we're about to read it. Property generates about half the tax revenue collected by the city every year. Councilors, many of them socialists. That is great. That is an excellent point. Socialists who want to expand the city's safety net got a rude awakening last July when the U.S. Bancorp Tower, nicknamed Big Pink, sold for just $45 million, down from the $373 million that Swiss Bank, UBS Group, AG and Seattle-based Unico Properties paid in 2015. And then it went from 373 up to like 450 and change, 450 million. And it just sold for how much? $45 million. Why? Because downtown Portland is not where you want to own commercial right now. You got homeless people. You got whacked out drug addicts that are homeless. You don't have enough cops. You've got this, hey man, anything goes kind of attitude. And the downtown core, even though attempts have been made to clean it up, the downtown core is a ghost town. Just walk down there. You can't tell if businesses are in business because they're all boarded up, because the whacked out nut job addicted homeless come by and bash out windows so often. I mean, and some businesses they just board up their windows and, oh, we're still open. Come on in. But it looks like you're closed. Oh, and about 9 out of 10 of the storefronts are empty. I walked around like, oh, this isn't good. Then you get to the one mini mart, Pete's on 4th, and it is a wild experience. Just what planet are we? Oh, we're on the planet of addicted drug addicts. Yeah, that's what's going on here. Oh, yeah, this isn't good. Get me back to Bellevue. That sale reduced the amount of tax the city can collect on the 42-story building by a whopping 68%. What I want you to keep in mind is that sale at $45 million creates a comparable sale for all other commercial property owners to point to and say, hey, that one sold for that. So what's their cap rate? Oh, not good. Yeah, it's a comparable sale. It's a piece of data. And every commercial property owner that can use that as a sale will use that as a sale to reduce their property taxes. So that sale reduced the amount by whopping 68% from $2.7 million in 2024 to $860,000. Huge discount. Gone in an instant was almost $2 million that could have spent on public safety or bolster Portland street response. Yeah, they would have spent it on tents and blankets for the homeless, right? That's what they would have spent that on. That part of property tax calculation is simple. It gets more complicated when you consider that the sale of a marquee property like Big Pink becomes a data point for the county assessor's attempt to determine the value of property held by 300,000 accounts. You got 300,000 commercial buildings, something like that, right? With a staff of just 160 assessors and appraisers, Vaughn can't send someone to inspect every property, so he relies on math. All right, so they have formulas. They have formulas and they apply those to all the buildings. Now their formulas are based on a comp at $45 million for a massive building. What's the dollars per square foot on that? Not much. Land value, right? Land value. Now, keep in mind, I am a residential appraiser, but the concepts are still basically the same. One bases on income stream. Residential properties typically base their values based on data, sales data, same thing we're talking about here. In the commercial world, you extrapolate multipliers for valuation purposes based on, well, it was all rented out for this and it sold for this, and then you get your formula, right? Atop of all that work, Vaughn's staff must deal with commercial property owners who see Big Pink's decline and appeal their own valuations. And that's what we've talked about many, many times. Is this is going to have not even a trickle-down effect. It's going to have a boulder coming down the mountain effect, right? 2018, when Portland was still Portlandia, Vaughn's office fielded 277 petitions from owners of industrial, commercial, and multifamily properties. Last year, they got 722. What do they get, this year in 2025? 2,000? I don't know. I have no idea. But it's got to be more, right? More. Now, there's no guarantee that when you go to petition your taxes that you're going to win. You got to spend a bunch of money hiring an appraiser who oftentimes it doesn't really do much of, it doesn't, most appraisals that are put together on the residential side for tax valuation purposes of reducing them doesn't work because they're going on a rolling average. But now in the commercial market in not only Portland, but all over the United States, you're going to have those sales start to come in. Oh, yeah, that's during that period. Oh, yeah. Property values dropped by 80%. So they jumped to $18.3 million in 2023. For 2024, refunds could reach $30 million when they're all resolved. So you're giving back money. You're giving back money, and moving forward, you're collecting less. See where I'm going with this? That's not good. And all that even is easy to understand compared with the concept of compression. And you know what? If you want to read this article, you can, but I'm not going to get into the whole compression thing other than what I'm going to do is you've got a couple of measures. You've got measure 5 and then you've got measure 50. One of them basically says based on 90% of real market value is what taxes are going to be based on. And the other is valuations can only increase by 3%. So I am literally just kind of throwing out my limited understanding of Oregon tax law. Don't quote me. I'm a residential guy and I'm also not a CPA, but it's my understanding that those two concepts are indicative of where we sit, which is basically here. So you can see property values have been dropping since 2019. Let me get my yellow pointer. Property values have been dropping since 2019. This is market value, right? Boop, downhill. Okay. And because of that 3% a year deal, you've got assessed values right here. Now, these assessed values have kind of held steady, right? They have held steady because there haven't been a ton of sales because nobody has wanted to sell a property throughout that time period. But now you're starting to get sales. You've had sales here. And now market value is less than assessed value. And that is this break point right here in 2024. And now with these closed sales coming through, you've got issues. You're going to need a big box of tissues for all of your issues. So to summarize, everything was pretty straightforward as long as Oregon property values kept rising. During the boom years, real estate market values soared, dragging assessed values up but only by 3% a year. People generally paid taxes on the assessed value, which was lower. Then COVID-19 happened. Market values for the downtown office buildings tumbled. It's a nice way of putting it. Tax-wise, it didn't matter, at least at first. Real market values, which had run up like hares, bunnies, stayed above assessed values, which had followed like tortoises. Yeah, they lagged wildly, but on purpose, right? Hey, as long as you're still going up, we're all good, right? So long as that was the case, going up. The basis for property tax bills didn't really change. Now, though, real market values for office buildings are plunging below assessed values, making them the driver of tax collections and compression. We are compressing the ability for Portland to collect its tax revenue. And so you got a bunch of socialist commies in Portland that are like, what? What happened? What's going on here? I don't get it. Well, you drove off all the businesses and nobody wants to own a building in Portland unless it's at a massive, massive discount. Like almost all, right? Almost all. That's what Big Pink was. Almost all. I think 45 million is an absolute bargain. I mean, that is just, if you have the balls to put that together, you do that all day long because at some point in time, Oregon's going to have a little bit of recovery and you can drop those rents pretty significantly to get Big Pink rented out if you needed to. At 45 million, you can take some debt. I'm pretty sure they paid cash. You can take a little bit of debt and you'll be just fine and dandy. You can make that work. You can't make Big Pink work at previous rents in today's property valuations. Because, what happened is the whole building just got basically emptied out and then you don't have people paying and you still got taxes and everything else, property maintenance, insurance, all that. And you don't have the revenue coming through to make it go. But when you drop those prices, that's happening all across the city, right? All across the city. It's not like this is the flagship. This is the flagship sinking. Is what this is. So unless you're a tax expert, understanding compression can seem like trying to hear the sound of one hand clapping. It's a good way to describe it. Really, It's the clatter of measures 5 and 50 crashing into each other. Oh, yeah. Oh, hey. Like drunken bicyclists after a beer festival in Waterfront Park. Best way to understand it is probably by example, and there's no better example than Big Pink. Real market value of Big Pink peaked in 2019 at $456 million. That year, though, its maximum assessed value was just $168 million, because remember the 3% per year, because value could only rise 3%. Measure 50, while market value could go through the roof. That means Big Pink's owners only paid tax on the assessed value of $168. Their bill was $4.3 million. Big Pink's real market value plunged during the pandemic, then collapsed this year when a car dealership, Jeff Swickard, bought the place at the low price of $45 million. That was a genius buy. It just was. I don't care who you are. Sales price of a building doesn't automatically become its real market value. No, but it's a pretty good indicator. And if you're a property owner of commercial building, you're going to point at that baby all day long. Hey, what Big Pink sell for? Yeah, we know. The assessor could determine that the buyer got a crazy deal because the seller had a gambling debt to pay off. Well, they're talking about not a market transaction. Definition of market value being typically motivated seller, typically motivated buyer. Is this a unusual sale? Does this have circumstances that mean you take it out of the data pool for assessing? I don't think so. This is just heavily discounted because you have a market in Portland that is such. You've got desperation sales. That is the market. So you had a gambling debt to pay off, or that the buyer overpaid because there's black mold everywhere. Though neither of those are the cases. This is market conditions. And market conditions in Portland are terrible because you had everything like everybody else did in all the other big cities. Everybody left and went and worked remotely. But then you had the summer of love. Let's not forget that. And recently, you've had, and nobody's come back. And recently you've had, Antifa and ICE just going head to head, and Trump threatening to, run in the troops. And you've got leadership in Portland that has its head so far up its ass that it doesn't really recognize that, hey, maybe having Antifa go to town every single night, close to downtown Portland isn't good for the optics of the city. Instead, Portland and its leadership and even the governor are in such a position where, well, this is a freedom of speech free right, and we will stand up to Trump. Hey, your city looks terrible. You just had a massive discount price on one of your biggest buildings. You're not going in the right direction. You're going in the wrong direction, even if it's just from an optics perspective. And that's what big business looks at when they want to rent commercial space in a city like Portland. Hey, what do you hear about Portland? Portland? Have you been there? Seriously. Meanwhile, you've got the governor and you've got the mayor, prancing around, saying everything's fine. Everything's fine. Well, if everything's fine, why did Big Pink just sell for $45 million? Crickets. That's what I thought. In this case, Vaughn, the county assessor, agreed that the building is worth $45 million, far beyond the $143 million maximum assessed value just a year earlier. 2024, Vaughn had been lowering the assessed value since 2022. Good for him. He's like, I'm not going to get caught my pants down on this one. Things are going down. When it became clear that work from home was going to be a thing and the Portland's downtown would keep struggling, but $45 million was a shock. Yeah. It was. That's pretty close to the land value. Yep. If not, straight up land value. Here's where Measure 5 went to work, and bear with us. Okay, we're going to skip down to a bunch of stuff. You got a bunch of taxes and stuff. You got a bunch of different entities, things that the money goes to. Bottom line is the Measure 5 and Measure 50 substantially reduce the now tax bill for Big Pink. Huge. And so that's why the city council of Portland, they're getting together going, hey, Mr. Assessor, I see that your projected revenues are way, way down. Could you come in and give us a little talk? Because, we're socialists and we don't really get all this big business talk, even though that's what pays all the bills. We don't really get that. So come on in, Mr. Assessor. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about ways that we can regenerate interest in the downtown core. Right? For his part, Swickard says the Big Pink could spark a downtown revival. You're going to have to go through a little bit of cleanup first, right? Yeah. But this is a guy, very successful guy, who's just scored one of the biggest property deals ever in North American history in commercial. This is one of those. This is one of those leading edge deals that people are going to point to and go, remember Big Pink? Because it's come from it's dropped in value so much that it's inconceivable. If you would have told somebody 5 years ago, Big Pink's going to sell for $45 million, you would have said, ha ha ha, you are a moron. You are an absolute idiot. Because in order for that to happen, conditions in downtown Portland would have to absolutely crater off the face of the earth. And that's what happened. And that's how you get 450 million, 45 million. So he's saying could spark a downtown revival. Remember, this is coming from a guy who just scored the deal of the century, right? The art of the deal. This is literally the art of the deal. Property tax basis might be lower for now, he tells Willamette Week, correct? But the real opportunity lies in rebuilding value, because that's what he's going to do. And he's got to pitch it instead of saying, hey, I got a great deal because you guys screwed up Portland. He's not saying that, is he? You can't do that. You can't shit where you eat, right? Our communities and our confidence with the right leadership and economic approach. Okay, that is the key. That is the key. With the right leadership and economic approach. Right now, you've got leadership in Portland and in Oregon in general that is saying everything's fine. Everything's fine. It's great. It's all hunky-dory. Look at us walking down the streets. It's good. This is all fine. But Big Pink just sold for 45 million. Seem to have a dichotomy here, don't we? Portland can once again be one of the most dynamic urban centers in the country. Not with current leadership. Ain't gonna happen. You don't have the balls in current leadership to make the choices that you need to. You need to involuntarily put a bunch of your people in treatment, in long-term treatment, in mental institutions, or jail. You got to start coming down hard on crime. You're not doing any of those things, nor do you have the public will to do those things. You just don't. You don't. And it shows in Portland because Big Pink just sold for 45 million. There's your proof. There's your proof, right? Nobody wants to run a business. Nobody wants to take down office space in a city that has a bunch of lunatics running around that are, literally. You've got the city of Portland fighting against law enforcement of the removal of criminal illegals from their community. That happens in every single administration. That's a thing. Obama was the chief deporter, but because you don't like Trump, you don't like his policies, you don't like him getting stuff done, you don't like his peace accords. What about the whole free Palestine? Yeah, crickets on that, but hey, let's go after ICE because they're bad for deporting criminal illegals from our community. Make that make sense. The optics, what I'm saying, are horrific for new big businesses coming in to Portland. You're going to have some major changes take place. And those aren't happening anytime soon. Same thing with Seattle. You're about to have a socialist mayor in Seattle. Straight up socialist mayor. It's going to be great for guys like me because we're going to have podcasts for days, weeks, months, forever. Because you've got policy after policy after policy that doesn't work. Kind of like the street conditions in Portland right now. Remember? Big Pink. What did it sell for? That's right. $45 million. Fortunately for Portland, taxes on residential real estate account for about 60% of property tax. Commercial as a body of real estate doesn't have as big an impact as residential does. And you know what? Residential property values have held fairly tightly in most of the Pacific Northwest because of policy, have constricted the supply, and the outlook for building is not great. Interest rates have gone through the roof relative to where they were. And the outlook for constructing a whole bunch of units is like, nobody wants to take that risk. So in the meantime, the few buyers that are out there are holding steady with the supply. Now we've got about a 3-month supply in a lot of these markets, which is enormous relative to where we were, which was around 2 weeks in a lot of super strong residential markets. But the residential market has a wildly different supply and demand curve. People need houses. Businesses don't need commercial buildings. And we proved that during the pandemic. Hey, you guys all just go work from home. Should work out fine, right? Right? Yeah. Portland has had the perfect storm of how not to run your downtown core. And the greatest example, Big Pink, $45 million sale. That's why it's so important. How much of an impact will this have on Portland's tax base? It'll have a bunch, and we'll be talking about it. Make sure you subscribe, hit that notification bell, and I'll talk to you in the next one. Thanks again for joining. Bye for now.